When winter descended upon a medieval English castle, it wasn't a season of cozy fireplaces and hot cocoa. It was a brutal, relentless fight against a cold that could kill. The thick stone walls, far from being a shield, acted like a giant refrigerator, trapping moisture and a bone-chilling cold that seeped into every room. You think you know how medieval castles worked. You think the Lord was the most important person in it. But what if the castle's most brilliant invention wasn't in his chambers, but in a room full of smoke and servants? Here's the real question that historians are afraid to ask. Was the heat of the castle kitchen a weapon? A silent, brutal weapon of war, more terrifying to an enemy than a trebuchet or a knight's sword? We're about to reveal 10 incredible facts that prove the castle kitchen was not just a place for cooking, but a masterpiece of medieval engineering and the thermodynamic heart of the entire castle. If you want to know the answer to that question, you'll have to watch this video to the very end. In many monasteries and some large castles, a specific room known as the calefactory was designated as a warming room. It was the only room outside of the kitchen where a constant fire was kept, providing a place for monks or castle inhabitants to warm themselves and their hands before returning to their cold, unheated tasks. The presence of a dedicated warming chamber highlights the extreme cold of medieval life, where most buildings lacked any form of permanent heating. These rooms were often located near the dormitory or the scriptorium, the two places where monks spent the most time in sedentary, often cold-inducing work. The heat from the fire was not just for comfort, it was essential for tasks like writing in the scriptorium, where cold fingers would struggle to hold a pen and parchment could become stiff and difficult to work with. The calefactory served as a social hub as well, a rare space where the inhabitants could gather and converse around a shared source of warmth. The use of the calefactory was a testament to the harsh realities of monastic life, where austerity was the rule. It was a vital concession to human need, allowing monks to perform their duties without succumbing to the debilitating effects of the cold. The warmth was a necessity for their work, as ink could freeze and parchment could become brittle in the cold. It was also a place for communal life, where the monks could gather and talk, a rare break from the silent routine of their lives. The calefactory was not just a room, it was a sanctuary from the pervasive chill of the monastery. It was a space where the community could come together, share a moment of warmth, and recharge before returning to their solitary, often frigid tasks. This dedicated warming chamber underscores the ingenuity of medieval architects and communities in adapting to their environment, creating a solution that was both practical and socially significant. The strategic location of the calefactory was paramount to its function. By placing it near the most frequented and coldest parts of the monastery, such as the sleeping quarters and the library, builders ensured that the warmth was accessible to those who needed it most. The design of the calefactory itself was often simple but effective, featuring a large central fireplace that could burn a significant amount of wood to produce a steady, intense heat. The walls of the room, often made of stone, would absorb this heat and then radiate it back into the space, creating a sustained warmth that lasted even after the fire had died down. This thermal mass was a key component of its effectiveness. The calefactory was also used for other practical purposes. Monks would often bring their books and manuscripts to the room to dry them out, preventing the pages from becoming damp and moldy in the cold, humid air of the monastery. It was a place for minor repairs and communal work, where the warmth made delicate tasks with cold hands possible. This multi-purpose use of the space highlights its importance to the daily life of the community. In a world with no central heating, the calefactory was a lifeline, a testament to the fact that even in the most austere of environments, human ingenuity and the need for comfort found a way to create a haven from the cold. Instead of a fireplace built into a wall, some of the earliest great halls featured a massive central hearth. The fire would burn in the middle of the room on a raised stone slab, with the smoke venting out through a hole in the roof. While smoky, this design provided heat to the entire room from a central point. The open nature of these central hearths meant that a significant amount of heat radiated directly into the space, making them highly effective for heating a large, open hall. The smoke, though a nuisance, was a byproduct that was tolerated in the absence of more sophisticated ventilation systems. Over time, as building techniques improved, These central hearths were largely replaced by wall-mounted fireplaces with chimneys, which were more efficient at smoke removal. However, the legacy of the central hearth can be seen in the design of some early chimneys, which were essentially large, conical hoods placed over the fire to funnel the smoke upwards. The central hearth was the heart of the Great Hall, both literally and figuratively. It was the focal point of all activity, a powerful social and architectural statement. The Lord and his family would sit at the high table, with the fire providing a visual and physical center to the room. It was where feasts were cooked, where stories were told, and where justice was often meted out. The open fire was a source of light, warmth, and community. The smoke, while a drawback, was an accepted part of the atmosphere. The open roof hole, or louvre, was often a simple opening, sometimes with a small turret or lantern to protect it from rain, but it was far from a perfect solution for smoke removal. The design of the central hearth was a reflection of the communal nature of medieval life, where a single fire served the entire community gathered in the Great Hall. The stone fireplaces in private chambers and halls had a large protruding stone hood that hung over the hearth. This architectural feature, known as a smoke hood, was crucial for directing smoke and soot up the chimney flue, preventing the room from filling with fumes and allowing the fire to burn more efficiently as a heat source. The development of the smoke hood and the integrated chimney was a major innovation in medieval architecture. It marked a transition from open, smoky fires to more contained and efficient heating systems. The smoke hood worked by creating a localized updraft, drawing the smoke and hot gases from the fire and channeling them into the chimney. This not only improved air quality within the room, but also made the fire more effective as a heat source, as the heat was directed into the room rather than lost in a smoky haze. The design of these hoods varied, from simple, unadorned stone structures to more elaborate decorated examples found in the homes of the wealthy. The presence of a smoke hood in a chimney became a status symbol, indicating a higher level of comfort and architectural sophistication. The fireplace hood and chimney were a game changer. They allowed for a contained and directed fire, which meant that a room could be heated without being filled with smoke. This was particularly important in private chambers, where the need for a clean, warm environment was paramount. The chimney allowed for the creation of multiple fireplaces in a single building, each with its own flue, which was a significant step towards modern heating systems. The design of the fireplace hood itself was often a work of art, with intricate carvings and heraldic symbols adorning the stone. It was a sign of wealth and power, a clear demarcation between the smoky, open hearth Great Hall and the more refined private chambers of the nobility. Heating a medieval home was a complex and often inefficient process, but these three methods, calefactories, central hearths, and fireplace hoods, represent key adaptations and innovations that made life more bearable in a world without modern central heating. They show a progression from simple open fires to more sophisticated architectural solutions for warmth and smoke management. The calefactory offered a dedicated space for warmth, the central hearth a powerful, albeit smoky solution for large halls, and the fireplace hood a crucial step towards modern, contained fireplaces with proper ventilation. These architectural features were not just functional, they were central to the social and daily life of medieval people, shaping how they worked, socialized, and survived the cold. The need for warmth drove architectural innovation, leading to the development of features that would eventually evolve into the modern fireplace and central heating systems we know today. The shift from a central, open hearth to a wall-mounted fireplace with a chimney represented a major leap in comfort and technology. It was a move from a communal, smoke-filled space to a more private, cleaner, and more efficient heating system. The development of the chimney allowed for the creation of smaller, more intimate rooms that could be heated effectively, a concept that was foreign to the builders of the great halls. The fireplace hood was the critical component of this transition, bridging the gap between the open hearth and the modern fireplace. It was a testament to the ingenuity of medieval masons and architects who, through trial and error, discovered how to harness the power of a fire and direct its heat and smoke in a way that improved the quality of life within a castle. The evolution of these heating methods mirrors the evolution of medieval society, from a communal, large-scale way of living to a more private, individualistic one. While the main walls were stone, many interior partitions and floors were constructed with a wattle and daub technique, using woven sticks covered in a mix of clay, straw, and animal manure. This material acted as an effective insulator, trapping warmth and preventing drafts from other parts of the castle. The process of creating wattle and daub involved a meticulous sequence of steps. First, a framework of upright posts known as staves was erected. These staves were then interwoven with horizontal branches, or withies, to create the wattle. This intricate basket-like structure was then coated with the daub. The daub itself was a carefully concocted mixture. Clay provided the structural body, while straw and other fibrous materials acted as a binder, preventing cracks as the mixture dried. Animal manure, particularly horse dung, was a common addition. Its fibrous nature also helped with binding, and its slight ammonia content acted as a preservative, deterring insects and rot. The application of the daub was often done in multiple layers. An initial rough layer was pushed firmly into the wattle to create a solid base. Subsequent layers were then applied and smoothed, sometimes with the addition of a fine plaster or lime wash on the surface for a cleaner finish. This method was remarkably effective not just for insulation, but also for soundproofing, creating a more peaceful interior environment in the bustling castle. It was a testament to the ingenuity of medieval builders who used readily available natural materials to solve complex architectural challenges. The wattle and daub walls were surprisingly durable, and many examples have been found in archaeological excavations, showcasing the longevity of this ancient building technique. The material's thermal mass, or its ability to absorb and store heat, was another key advantage. During the day, the walls would absorb warmth from the sun or a nearby fire, and then slowly release that heat back into the room during the colder night. This passive heat regulation was a crucial component of medieval climate control. The widespread use of wattle and daub in various forms, from humble peasant cottages to the interior walls of great castles, underscores its practicality and effectiveness. It was a sustainable, low-cost solution that made a significant difference in the daily lives of those who inhabited these cold stone fortresses. The durability and thermal properties of wattle and daub were further enhanced by local variations in materials and techniques. For example, in regions with abundant oak forests, builders would often use young, flexible oak saplings for the wattle, which were stronger and more rot-resistant than other woods. In areas with rich, loamy soil, the clay mixture could be particularly dense and effective. The choice of straw also varied. Rye or wheat straw was often preferred for its long fibers, which provided excellent binding. The process of applying the daub was often a communal effort, with a team of workers mashing the mixture with their feet in a large pit before carrying it to the wall. This ensured a thorough mixing of all the components. The final layer of daub, sometimes referred to as the top coat, was often mixed with sand or finely chopped straw to prevent surface cracking as it dried. This top coat could then be whitewashed with a lime solution, which not only brightened the interior, but also acted as a natural disinfectant and a barrier against pests. The entire process, from gathering the materials to the final application, was a masterclass in resourcefulness and hands-on engineering. It was a building tradition passed down through generations, with each generation adding its own refinements and local knowledge. This is a testament to the idea that sustainable building practices are not a modern invention, but have deep historical roots. In addition to bed warmers, sometimes large bricks or specific warming stones were heated in a fire and then placed under the floorboards of a small area or in a special recess. The stone would slowly radiate its heat into the room, providing a localized and long-lasting source of warmth. These warming stones were typically made of dense, heat-retaining materials like soapstone or certain types of slate. The process was simple yet effective. The stones would be carefully placed in the embers of a fire, often in a dedicated area to prevent them from becoming coated in soot or ash. Once sufficiently hot, they would be removed using tongs or a thick cloth and placed in their designated spots. The placement of these stones was often strategic. They might be placed in a small chamber or a private study, where a lord or lady would spend a significant amount of time. They could also be placed in the hearth of a bedchamber under the flagstones to provide a warm area for bare feet. The slow, steady release of heat from the stone was a far cry from the fierce, flickering heat of a fireplace. It was a gentle, consistent warmth that could last for many hours, making a significant difference in the comfort of a cold room. This method was particularly useful in areas where a large fire was impractical or undesirable. It was a discreet and efficient way to provide warmth without the smoke, ash, and constant tending required by a traditional fireplace. The use of these warming stones highlights a deeper understanding of thermal physics, even if it wasn't formally recognized as such. The builders knew that a dense material could absorb a large amount of heat and release it gradually, and they harnessed this property to improve the living conditions within their castles. The practice of heating stones for warmth is an ancient one, with evidence dating back to pre-Roman times. Its continued use in the medieval period shows its enduring practicality and value. The practice of heating stones for warmth was a common solution in many cultures and climates. Beyond the castle, it was a vital part of daily life for ordinary people. In some peasant homes, hot stones were placed in a pit in the floor and covered with earth and straw, creating a form of early underfloor heating. This was particularly effective for keeping a small, tightly built cottage warm throughout the night. The stones were often sourced from local riverbeds, as river rocks tend to be smooth and dense, making them ideal for retaining and radiating heat. The process of heating them was often done as part of the evening cooking fire, so it required no extra fuel. It was a highly efficient and sustainable use of resources. The stones were also used for medicinal purposes. Heated stones wrapped in cloth were often applied to sore muscles or aching joints, providing a soothing warmth that relieved pain. This therapeutic use shows that the value of the stone's thermal properties went beyond simple climate control. The method of heating the stones evolved over time. While originally placed directly in the fire, later innovations included using a dedicated stone warming hearth, which had a separate compartment for the stones, keeping them clean and free of ash. This was a significant improvement, as it made the stones safer and more pleasant to handle. The warming stone also had a symbolic role. In a cold, often harsh world, the simple, reliable warmth of a heated stone was a source of comfort and security. It represented a small, controllable piece of warmth in a vast and often unforgiving environment. The widespread and enduring use of this technique is a powerful example of how simple, natural elements can be harnessed to improve quality of life. Builders intuitively understood the power of the sun. The main living quarters and halls were often oriented to face south, allowing them to benefit from maximum sunlight throughout the day. This passive solar heating provided a noticeable increase in temperature, especially on a clear winter day. This wasn't a matter of chance. It was a deliberate architectural choice. A south-facing wall would receive the most direct sunlight for the longest duration, particularly during the winter months when the sun's path is lower in the sky. This sunlight would warm the massive stone walls, which have a high thermal mass. The stone would absorb this heat and then slowly radiate it into the interior of the castle long after the sun had set. This process, known as thermal mass heating, was a key component of medieval climate control. It wasn't just about the warmth. The sun's light also made the interior spaces more pleasant and livable. The south-facing orientation was often combined with the placement of large, often arched windows on these walls to maximize light and heat penetration. While glass was a luxury and often limited to small panes, the large openings themselves allowed for a significant amount of solar gain. In summer, when the sun's path was higher, the castle's battlements and other architectural features could cast shadows, helping to prevent the interiors from overheating. This dual function of providing warmth in winter and some shade in summer shows a sophisticated understanding of solar geometry. The orientation of a castle's main structures was often one of the first and most critical decisions made during its design. The strategic placement of the Great Hall, the Lord's Chambers, and other important rooms was always done with an eye toward maximizing the benefits of natural light and heat. This passive solar design principle is still a cornerstone of sustainable architecture today, a testament to the enduring wisdom of these medieval builders. Their ability to harness the sun's energy with simple, unmechanized methods is a powerful reminder of how human ingenuity can adapt to and work with the natural world. The use of passive solar design wasn't just limited to castles. It was a foundational principle in many forms of medieval and pre-medieval architecture. Roman villas, for example, often featured large south-facing windows in courtyards to maximize solar gain. In the medieval period, this knowledge was passed down and adapted for the specific needs of a castle. The Great Hall, the heart of the castle's social and political life, was almost always situated to take advantage of this solar orientation. This not only made the space warmer and more comfortable, but it also reduced the need for artificial lighting, saving on costly candles and oil. The placement of windows was also a strategic consideration. While glass was a luxury, window openings were often fitted with wooden shutters or oiled cloth to provide some protection from the elements. On a sunny day, these could be opened to allow the sun to pour in, warming the stone in the air. The concept of thermal mass was central to this design. The thick stone walls of a castle were not just for defense, they were also a giant thermal battery. A day's worth of sunlight could be stored and released over many hours, providing a gentle, consistent heat source. This was a particularly elegant solution because it required no ongoing effort or fuel. It was a form of free energy that the builders learned to harness through careful observation and architectural design. The knowledge of solar geometry was not just a theoretical concept, it was a practical tool. Builders knew that the angle of the sun's path changed with the seasons, and that a well-designed building could take advantage of these changes. In the modern era, with our reliance on mechanical heating and cooling, it's easy to forget the power of these simple, elegant solutions. The medieval castle stands as a testament to the fact that building in harmony with nature is not a new idea, but a timeless one. The wisdom of these builders, who use the sun, the wind, and the earth to create comfortable and sustainable living spaces, is a legacy that continues to inform and inspire architects and engineers today. Smaller mobile iron furnaces or braziers were used by castle craftsmen. Blacksmiths, for example, had a small forge for their work, and other artisans might have a small furnace to heat materials. The heat from these workshops contributed to the overall warmth of the service areas of the castle. These portable heating sources were a marvel of medieval engineering. While the central Great Hall might have a massive hearth, the specialized workshops scattered throughout the castle required more focused and controllable heat. A blacksmith's forge, for instance, was an essential part of the castle's infrastructure. It was not just for making weapons and armor, but also for crafting tools, repairing chains, and creating the countless iron fittings needed for doors, windows, and furniture. The constant fire and the rhythmic pounding of the hammer on hot metal were a source of both noise and a welcome warmth in the colder parts of the castle. Similarly, other artisans had their own heating methods. A candle maker would need a constant heat source to melt wax or tallow, a process that would fill the workshop with a gentle warmth and a distinct aroma. A potter might have a small kiln for firing ceramics, a process that required a sustained, high-temperature heat source. These smaller, task-specific furnaces were often fueled by charcoal, which burned hotter and more cleanly than wood, making it ideal for metalworking and other crafts. The heat generated by these activities was not contained within the workshop. It radiated out into the surrounding corridors and rooms, providing a secondary source of warmth for the castle's service staff and guards. The concentration of these workshops in the lower levels or courtyards of the castle created pockets of heat that made these areas more habitable, especially during the long winter months. The presence of these portable heat sources highlights the practicality and resourcefulness of medieval castle inhabitants. They did not rely on a single, centralized heating system, but instead utilized a network of smaller, task-specific heat sources that, when combined, contributed significantly to the castle's overall thermal environment. The flexibility of these portable heating devices was a key advantage. They could be moved to where they were needed, and their size meant they consumed less fuel than a massive hearth. The braziers, in particular, were often used in private chambers or guard posts where a full fireplace was either impractical or non-existent. These small portable heaters could be filled with hot coals from a central fire and then carried to a specific location, providing a localized source of warmth for several hours. This was especially useful for sentries on a cold night, who could huddle near a brazier to keep their hands and feet warm. The design of these braziers often included a sturdy base and a handle, making them easy to transport and place securely. The use of charcoal was a deliberate choice. Its high carbon content meant it burned with a steady, intense heat and produced very little smoke, which was crucial for indoor use. The ability to control the amount of airflow to the charcoal also allowed for a precise control of the temperature, which was essential for a blacksmith or a metalworker. This network of small, specialized heat sources shows a sophisticated understanding of thermal management. Instead of trying to heat the entire castle with one or two large fires, the medieval inhabitants created a distributed heating system that was efficient, adaptable, and perfectly suited to the diverse needs of the castle's many residents and their various occupations. This practical, decentralized approach to heating was a hallmark of medieval ingenuity. The inhabitants of a castle were not sedentary. The constant physical activity of medieval life, from hunting and riding to building and cleaning, generated a significant amount of body heat. This active lifestyle was a fundamental, if unintentional, component of staying warm. The life of a medieval person, regardless of their social standing, was physically demanding. A knight might spend hours in the training yard, practicing with heavy swords and lances. A lady of the court would be busy with embroidery, managing the household, or riding on horseback. The castle's servants were in constant motion, hauling water, chopping wood, preparing food, and cleaning the vast, cold halls. This high level of physical exertion was a natural defense against the cold. The human body, when active, generates a significant amount of heat. This internal furnace was a critical part of a person's ability to withstand the frigid temperatures of a stone castle. The clothing of the time, often made of wool or multiple layers of linen, was also designed to trap this body heat, creating a personal microclimate for each individual. The architecture of the castle itself, with its long corridors, steep stairs, and open courtyards, encouraged movement. One could not simply sit in one spot. The demands of daily life required constant traversing of the castle's vast spaces. This constant movement, combined with the heavy, often wool-based clothing, meant that the inhabitants were in a perpetual state of generating and retaining heat. It was a lifestyle that was inherently designed to combat the cold, even if the inhabitants were not consciously thinking in those terms. The contrast between the cold, stone walls and the warm, active bodies within was a defining characteristic of medieval life. The physical demands of daily life were a constant source of heat generation. Beyond the formal duties of knights and ladies, everyone had a role to play. Children, even those of noble birth, spent their days in supervised play and learning that often involved vigorous activity. The castle's garrison, the soldiers and guards, were always in motion, patrolling the walls, training, and maintaining their equipment. Even in the relatively static roles of a scribe or a priest, the demands of reading by candlelight in a cold room often led to a more active posture, such as pacing or standing, to keep warm. The very act of fetching and carrying water from a well or wood from the forest was a form of exercise that produced a significant amount of body heat. The heavy, often bulky clothing of the era, while sometimes restrictive, was excellent at trapping this heat. Tunics, surcoats, and cloaks, often made of thick woolen cloth, created a protective layer against the cold stone of the castle. The physical exertion was not just a byproduct of daily life, it was a necessary survival strategy. Without the ability to generate their own heat through constant activity, the inhabitants of a cold, drafty castle would have found it impossible to survive the long, harsh winters. The active lifestyle was, therefore, an integral part of the castle's ecosystem of warmth, a human-powered heating system that was always in operation. While candles were primarily a source of light, a room filled with a dozen or more burning candles, especially those made from beeswax or tallow, could produce a noticeable amount of heat. This was a form of incidental heating that was a byproduct of illumination. The darkness of a castle at night was absolute, and candles were a necessity for any activity after sundown. The primary purpose of a candle was to provide light, but its secondary effect was to produce heat. A single candle's heat output is negligible, but when multiplied across a large hall or a well-lit chamber, the effect could be substantial. Beeswax candles were a luxury reserved for the lord, lady, and high-ranking guests. They burned cleanly with a pleasant, sweet aroma. Tallow candles made from rendered animal fat were more common and provided a similar amount of heat, though they tended to produce more smoke and a less appealing odor. The heat from these candles was a form of radiant heat, warming the air and the objects around them. In a small enclosed space, a significant number of candles could raise the ambient temperature by a few degrees. The use of candelabra and wall sconces was not just for aesthetics. It was a practical way to disperse light and heat throughout a room. The presence of multiple sources of light also helped to create a more inviting and less intimidating atmosphere in a large, dark room. The heat from the candles was a small but significant contribution to the overall warmth of the castle's interior. The strategic use of candles went beyond simple illumination. In private chambers, a small army of candles in a candelabrum could make a noticeable difference in the air temperature. The radiant heat from the flames would warm the air immediately around them, and the gentle convection would circulate this warmth throughout the room. The glow of the candles also had a psychological effect, making the cold, dark stone walls seem less imposing and more welcoming. The use of beeswax candles in particular was a sign of wealth and status. The clean, steady flame and pleasant scent were a marked contrast to the smoky, acrid smell of tallow candles. Tallow, being more common and cheaper to produce, was used in the more utilitarian parts of the castle, such as the kitchens and servant quarters. The heat generated by these candles, while small individually, added up to a significant thermal contribution. This incidental heating was a perfect example of a dual-purpose solution. The inhabitants needed light, and the act of providing that light also helped to combat the cold. It was a clever and efficient use of resources, where a necessity served a secondary, beneficial purpose. The warmth from the candles was a constant, albeit small, companion to the heat from the fireplaces and other sources, working together to make the castle's interiors more livable during the coldest months. Beyond the heat from the ovens and fires, the brewing process itself, particularly fermentation, is an exothermic reaction that produces heat. When a castle's brewery was in full operation, it would generate a substantial amount of warmth, which often radiated into adjacent rooms and service areas. The brewing process was a central part of castle life, as ale and beer were staples of the medieval diet. The brewing room, often located in a lower level of the castle, was a hive of activity. The large copper vats used for boiling the wort, the sweet liquid that would become beer, were a major source of heat. These vats were heated by large fires underneath, and the steam and heat generated would fill the room, creating a warm, humid environment. The process of fermentation, where yeast converts sugar into alcohol, also produces a significant amount of heat. The large wooden barrels and vats filled with fermenting ale would radiate this heat into the room. This constant heat, combined with the heat from the ovens in the adjacent kitchens, made these service areas some of the warmest in the entire castle. The heat from these areas was not confined. It would rise through the floors and into the rooms above, providing a gentle warmth to the floors and walls. The castle's kitchen was another major source of heat. The massive fireplaces and ovens used for roasting meat, baking bread, and preparing meals were in constant use. The heat from these fires, combined with the heat from the cooking processes themselves, made the kitchen a very warm place, even in the dead of winter. This constant heat source was not just for cooking. It was also a critical part of the castle's overall heating strategy. The symbiotic relationship between food production and warmth was a cornerstone of medieval castle design. The kitchen, often the hottest room in the castle, was a hub of activity. The heat from the great hearth and the stone ovens would not only cook the food, but also warm the large stones of the walls and floor, which would then radiate heat into the surrounding areas. The heat generated by the baking process was particularly intense. A large oven, once brought up to temperature, would retain that heat for many hours, warming not just the bread, but the entire room. This residual heat could then be used for other purposes, such as drying herbs or warming water. The brewing process added another layer of warmth. The boiling of the wort was a major heat event, and the subsequent fermentation process provided a steady, low-level heat source for days at a time. The brewing room was a microclimate of warmth and humidity, making it an ideal place for tasks that required a moderate temperature, such as mending cloth or preparing vegetables. The heat from these service areas was a valuable resource that was not wasted. The builders of the castle understood that heat rises, and they often designed the castle's layout to take advantage of this. The Great Hall, for example, might be located directly above the kitchens and brewing room, allowing the warmth to rise and provide a form of natural underfloor heating. This ingenious design demonstrates a deep understanding of thermodynamics and a practical approach to making a cold stone fortress a more habitable place. The incredible ingenuity of medieval engineers and cooks in solving the problem of heat proves one thing. Their world was far from primitive. It was a world of deep practical knowledge, resourcefulness, and a constant drive to survive and thrive. They turned the most basic needs into a complex, multi-layered system of thermal control, proving that intelligence and necessity are the true parents of invention. To see more amazing historical facts and to become a true connoisseur of medieval life, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell.